Hello everyone and welcome to Red Chat, the first therapeutic radiographer-led oncology podcast. Welcome to podcast number 47. My name is Naaman Joker Anderson and I'm joined by my fellow host Joe McNamara. A big thank you to our last guest Stephen Tao, who talked about Leo Cancer Care and being a CEO. If you haven't had a chance yet, please do go and take a listen. So we're very pleased to introduce our guest for this evening, Dr. Lisa Whittaker, who will be discussing the Radiation Reveal project. Hi Lisa.
Hi.
So Lisa, please can you tell us a bit about yourself and kind of how you got to where you are?
Yeah, of course. And first of all, thanks so much for having me on. I love the podcast. So my current role is project coordinator for the Radiation Reveal project. I was really lucky to be given this job on a freelance basis, and I started work on the project back in November last year. It's been a really, really brilliant project to work on. It's all about patient engagement and involvement in research, which is something that I'm really, really passionate about. And I've learned so much about radiotherapy from everyone that's been involved in the project.
So what's a normal day for you, I suppose, at the moment?
A normal day. Do you know, I'm not sure. I have 5-year-old twins, so a normal day usually involves a lot of coffee. But what I love about the work that I do is just how varied it is. So working on Radiation Reveal has meant that kind of no 2 days have been the same. I've spent time speaking to people in lots of different charities that support young people and young adults, such as Trek Stock and Young Lives versus Cancer. Spent a lot of time speaking to young people, reading, learning about radiotherapy, a huge variety of different things, and that's kind of why I love the work that I do, and I love a bit of running too, so I try and squeeze that in when I can.
Good, love a run. I'm sure the kids keep you busy as well anyway. So
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Did you know much about radiotherapy before going into this kind of area?
I knew a little bit, so a little bit based on kind of, I've never had radiotherapy, but a little bit kind of based on personal experience I had my own cancer diagnosis a few years ago, but I didn't need to have radiotherapy. But yeah, I've worked within the cancer sector now for, probably coming up for 10 years. So I was aware a little bit, but nothing really in depth. And, one of the things that I've kind of learned through this project is just the need to raise awareness of radiotherapy, with more and more patients having radiotherapy. It's what the young people said as part of Radiation Reveal was that it still wasn't given as much attention as the likes of chemo, and I think that it's great to be part of just educating myself and hopefully educating and raising awareness in others about radiotherapy and how it works, and also finding out from researchers about the important and fascinating work that they're doing to try and improve radiotherapy as a treatment all the time and kind of advance it. So a good question.
Sorry, Lisa, can I ask, what's your professional background?
My early career and background was in youth work. So yeah,
how did you get into
young people? I did a
being a freelancer to go into
masters, and then I went on to do a PhD. I was really lucky to do a PhD, and that was all focused on young people's experiences of unemployment, and that was round about the recession in 2008. So really, really interesting, and met again lots of lovely young people who were, I was really grateful to them for sharing their experiences with me. But I always knew, despite doing a PhD, that I didn't want to be an academic. That just wasn't for me, for various different reasons. But what I did, I was very passionate and am very passionate about research, and I just like chatting to people and kind of building relationships and I guess connecting people together. So I stuck to the sort of engagement roles and worked for a few different charities, and then 6.5 years ago moved from Scotland down to Wales. So I'm based in Cardiff now, and that was I joined a cancer charity here in Wales and worked with cancer researchers and patients and the public to share research and to give patients the opportunity to find out about research and inform future research. And loved all of that kind of work. Sadly, I was made redundant from that job during the pandemic, which, I know happened to a lot of people. But that I'd always done bits and pieces of freelance work in the same sort of area. And that really gave me the opportunity to think, okay, could I do freelance work sort of on a full-time basis? Could I make a living from it? And I did for about 6 months. And then even though I was very lucky to get lots of work and worked on some interesting projects, the uncertainty of just freelance work was not for me. I've got a young family, so I decided to try and go back to balancing the two. And I was really lucky to get a job at a charity called Mummy Star. So I kind of work there as my main job, and then I can do these freelance projects on the side, which is brilliant. It's a great sort of combination. It's worked out really well so far.
Thank you for sharing your story about kind of your treatment as well. Do you find that having been through the system, you kind of understand cancer as a whole a bit better? Or kind of maybe what people's experiences are, or just from kind of what you've been through?
I understand a little bit. So I was diagnosed with thyroid cancer nearly 5 years ago when my twins were 5 weeks old. And, I'm not going to say it wasn't a hard and challenging time, and obviously that's not the news anyone wants to have. It's certainly not the news I wanted with little babies, and I'd found the lump in my neck when I was pregnant, so I kind of had a period of extreme worry and not knowing what was going on or what was going to happen. But my GP was fantastic. I was referred really quickly, diagnosed really quickly, and then I had surgery. And then between myself and discussions with my oncologist and Macmillan nurse, I decided not to have radioactive iodine treatment, and they supported that decision, and I've been monitored really regularly. So I feel like I have some insight, but I've not been through half of what, so many people diagnosed with cancer have been through. So it's definitely, before my diagnosis, cancer was something that it was my work life, and it was something that happened to other people. And I do think that personal experience has given me, much more empathy, much more understanding, and much more of an insight into what people go through. And certainly speaking to young people as part of the Radiation Reveal project, I can't believe what some of them have been through. And yeah, I think they're amazing, and anything that I can do to kind of support or, like I said before, sort of raise awareness, that's what I try to do now. Yeah.
Snap, Lisa. So I was diagnosed with thyroid cancer 2 years ago, and I have to say it's exactly the same, because I think in a way you kind of feel like, oh, I'm lucky because it's thyroid cancer, because it can be treated. And obviously working within oncology, how much maybe other cancer patients have to go through, but it is still those words, isn't it? I'm sorry to inform you, but it is cancer. And although I reacted really, really differently, which I know I've talked about on the podcast before, but I kind of did a cheer to my oncologist because I was like, yeah, I get to use my own personal experience in teaching. And he went, oh, you're very strange. But it is still on reflection. And I think now it's kind of, now you reflect on it and you go, yeah, actually, and it has affected my life, and it does affect your life. I do think any cancer diagnosis changes you as a person, but there are obviously those times when you think, thank goodness I haven't had to go through further treatment or more invasive treatment. Don't get me wrong, the surgery itself is pretty horrific for thyroid cancer and having your thyroid removed. and also the long-lasting effects.
someone
But I
said to
think
me
that
when I was
obviously
diagnosed,
helps you,
thyroid
as
cancer,
you
that's a
said,
good cancer to
empathise
have.
with
And I was
patients
like, I
about,
cannot believe that
taking a
anyone would
medication every
describe
day,
cancer
and
as
the
good,
realities of that, and
regardless of,
being able to
your
actually
situation, your diagnosis.
kind of
that
think
was
about
just a
long-term effects of
bizarre
cancer.
thing
It's
to say.
definitely opened my eyes to that.
And
It's okay to
I
have your
absolutely
treatment
agree.
and get on with life, but actually you're
I
left with
meet
a
people, I
reminder
speak
of
to
it
people
for
with
life,
various
aren't
different
you?
experiences of thyroid cancer, as part of Radiation Reveal and also in my job at Mummy Star. And just exactly as you said, Joe, the kind of longer lasting and kind of psychological effects of thyroid cancer, and if you've had to go through the radioactive iodine treatment. There was one lovely young woman as part of Radiation Reveal who was diagnosed when she was 12, and she had radioactive iodine treatment when she was, a child essentially, and that's had a huge effect on her. And even, at the time, she felt like all of the conversation, the information was directed to her parents, and at times she remembers being put out the room while doctors and people spoke to her parents. And yeah, it's just, I was actually chatting to her last night, and she was talking about, the daily medication, and she's admitted she's not been taking hers as regularly as she could, and it's a bit of rebellion against, I don't want to be in this position, I don't want to be taking this medication every day, but she knows she has to, and it is important to try and, keep well. And yeah, I was so ignorant to everything that your thyroid did before I found I had a problem with mine. So I seen an advert looking for a project coordinator for Radiation Reveal, around about October time last year, and the project was all about bringing together young people, young adults who'd had radiotherapy, bringing them together with cancer researchers who were working on radiation research. And I remember seeing the advert.
So Lisa, Radiation Reveal, I know you've said a little bit about it, but how did it come about? How did you get to work on the project?
Who was the public engagement manager at King's in London, and said, "Oh, I'm really interested. This is right up my street." Apparently, I'm not very good at playing it cool, because there was obviously an application process. But I, emailed her right away, because it just, based on my background of youth work and working with young people and cancer research, it just ticked all of those boxes for me. And so yeah, it's Radiation Reveal is a really creative and collaborative public engagement project. It's a multi-partnership project, so it's involved, various different universities in London, but all people working within Cancer Research UK, RadNet, City of London. And we brought together 10 young adults aged between 17 and 25. And as I said, they've all had different types of cancer diagnosis, different treatments and different radiotherapy treatments, but they have all had radiotherapy. And we brought them together with 5 researchers, and we also involved 1 clinician as well. And we worked with Centre of the Cell, who are a science education centre based at Queen Mary University in London. And we did a lot of preparation, but the main part of the project was 3 workshops which took place in March. And the workshops allowed the young people to kind of share their experiences, tell their stories, and hear from the researchers about the research that they're involved in, and for both groups just to ask each other lots of questions and have a chat. And we did have lots of chats, and I realised that my kind of group facilitation skills and timekeeping skills could do with a bit of work, so we ran over quite a lot, but it was just because people had a lot to say, and it was really interesting, and everyone involved was so open and honest, which that was the success of the project, really, that everyone was happy to share. We tried to create a really safe space for everyone to feel comfortable to share quite hard times in their life. A couple of the young people are still going through chemo at the moment. They've still got a tremendous amount going on, but they were just brilliant, and it was such a privilege to meet them and hear from them. They were fab.
I think it's the real life experience. We've had quite a few patients on the podcast, and they say although I don't know, from a therapeutic radiographer side, we see patients in such a small amount of their time doing treatment. If you're on a treatment machine, you might only see one patient in their entire journey once or twice that you treat them. Or, you know, for my review in treatment, like in my role, in treatment review, I might see them for 2 or 3 different scheduled reviews to talk one-to-one. You get to know them better. But that kind of experience, where you're talking to people one-to-one, in that scenario where it's you're around people who've all been through the same thing, I think it does kind of generate more, I don't know, stimulation or conversation, because everyone, as you said earlier, both of you, that you can empathise a bit better having been through the same experience. I think it's really interesting. I think group situations aren't always the nicest for all patients, but I suppose something as structured as this, where you know you kind of have an end goal, if that makes sense, because you're trying to get something from it, aren't you?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we had, you know, the sort of, our aims were that young people had a chance to share their stories and hear from researchers. Researchers had a chance to hear from patients. You know, a couple of the researchers had never spoken to patients in this way before, so it was brilliant for them, and they really valued hearing patient experiences, you know, for the first time. And then we were trying to work towards, could we do something, could we produce something that might help future patients? And we're still trying to figure out what that looks like. But yeah, like you say, the project, it's not just going to run and run. I mean, essentially the project is kind of finished at the moment, although there's kind of, you know, several great opportunities that have come out of it, including chatting to you guys. But yeah, it was we tried to manage everyone's expectations, and we also paid young people for their time, because I think that's really, really important as well. You know, they gave up a huge amount of their time, and we did pay them for that. And yeah, I think that it's just, I believe that all researchers, but specifically, especially medical researchers, you know, it's so important that they hear those lived experiences and they engage with patients to find out what it is like for them. I think it's so valuable. I think patients, it's not for everyone, and it you know, you need to sort of pick your time, but I think a lot of people who have that lived experience that I've spoken to really appreciate the opportunity to share that and to feed into something that's meaningful. And I think it can have a huge benefit for researchers and future research. And the young people, I mean, some of them came up with some great ideas about what they thought researchers should be working on in terms of radiotherapy and different things, and they produced little diagrams, and I mean, it was just brilliant that what they came up with.
I think in research or in any kind of thing, you're always very target or endpoint focused, aren't you? So having someone who's in it give you an insight, especially this cohort where they're quite young. I'd like to say I'm still a little bit youngish, being in that cohort where, I don't know, having cancer is going to be tough enough. But if you think of the normal struggles that young people have nowadays of trying to get a job, come out of university, or don't go to university, try and get a job, or, you know, relationships and problems, but then to have to navigate the system with cancer at the same time, it's an incredible thing to have to do. I mean, we keep talking about how good we are at diagnosing people when patients are living longer, but, you know, you touched on that. The person who was part of the participant who was 12 when they went through it, childhood cancers. Yes, people live so much longer now, but the consequences they're very, very life-changing sometimes, aren't they? Do you find that they've all kind of they have really good relationships with each other, and have they taken that into friendship moving forward?
I certainly think a few of them will. So one of the things, you know, we've already mentioned it, but peer support is hugely important. And, you know, one of the young people said, you know, it doesn't matter how much your friends and family love you and want to help, they just don't get it in the same way that someone who's been through a similar experience does. And I think what was slightly surprising for me, because I know that there's so many good charities and support systems in place out there for young people and young adults, but this project was still the first time that a few young people had ever spoken to someone of a similar age who'd been through, you know, a similar experience. And, you know, it was just like, yeah, it was hugely important for them. I think they got a lot out of it. They did gel really, really well together as a group. They've got a little WhatsApp group, so they kind of keep in touch. And, you know, I think like all things, like naturally things will change over time, and maybe sort of, there'll be less conversation or different things will happen, but I certainly think a few of them have formed really strong bonds. And if, from our point of view as a project team, we always said if nothing else comes out of this project, just the fact that we've brought these young people together and they've had a chance to kind of have that peer support and chat to people who understand, well, that's enough. The fact that loads more came out of it is brilliant, but yeah, that peer support was so important. Loads, absolutely loads. So some of them had proton beam radiotherapy. As I mentioned before, a couple of them had radioactive iodine treatment. Some of them had external beam, and despite all their different diagnosis and different experiences with radiotherapy, there were some really common threads that ran through all of their experiences, and they were all treated kind of in various different hospitals as well. We've already spoken, so one big theme of the project was obviously, like we were chatting about just being a young person and having a cancer diagnosis. A lot of them felt like life was just getting started. There was lots of possibilities and things that they could do or were starting to do, and then, a cancer diagnosis happened and that changed things quite dramatically. They all agreed that much more attention needs to be given to radiotherapy. So they felt, especially for the people who'd had chemo and others had chemo and immunotherapy as well, they felt that the least attention had
been Lisa, given, what did you learn
information had been given about their radiotherapy treatment
from the participants about radiotherapy and radiation
sort of
treatments?
One young person was told that, radiotherapy is going to be a walk in the park compared to chemo. And sadly, that wasn't her experience. And many of them, they were all extremely grateful to have had radiotherapy as a treatment, and they absolutely recognised the value of it. But side effects were a huge thing, and they just, most of them spoke about just being really unprepared for the side effects. And I know that from the other perspective, sometimes it's hard to know and predict what side effects a patient will experience, but yeah, they just felt really unprepared, and some of them, were only seeking help when they felt helpless, because they didn't know, and that was kind of their words, not mine. And they also worry a lot about the late effects, just as we were talking about. They're young, hopefully they will have long lives ahead of them, but they worry about what effects might come when, and what medication they might have to take, and and different things. So there's a lot of worry there, and I think just a need for a bit more sort of information and communication, and them understanding sort of what's happening and why, and some and some sort of practical things that would have made a big difference to them, and yeah, I mean, we've already kind of talked about the sort of need for peer support. I mean, a lot of what they talked about around radiotherapy was sometimes not about the actual treatment itself, but about everything else that went round about it. And yeah, just I learned a huge amount. I could sort of speak to you all day about the different things that they spoke about. And it wasn't all negative experiences at all. Some of them were diagnosed several years ago, as I mentioned. Other people were diagnosed and treated during the pandemic, which obviously brought different challenges in terms of who they could have with them. And, one young person had to travel up to Manchester, which was a distance away from her home, and sort of stay there to have proton beam radiotherapy during lockdown. And that, just that whole experience in itself was, had a big impact on her.
I suppose, especially with the travelling side of... Oh, sorry, go on, Joe.
Yeah, definitely. I completely agree with that. Based on what the young people told us, they would even say that if they told friends or other peers that they were having radiotherapy, that nobody really knew what that was or what that meant, and that might mean daily appointments for a period of time, and just kind of just what that was, just what radiotherapy was, and I absolutely agree. I think that, sort of rightly or wrongly, we have come to know chemotherapy as a very sort of traditional standard treatment for many cancers, and we're also quite familiar with.
I was just going to ask: had the participants ever heard of radiotherapy previously? Because I think the general knowledge of the general public is actually poor, ultimately, around radiotherapy as well. When you talk about chemotherapy, Joe Blogs on the street, my grandparents. They kind of know what chemotherapy is, but radiotherapy, when I said I was going to be a therapeutic radiographer and work in radiotherapy, they were like, you're going to be on the radio? Well, you do talk lots. And so that general perception of radiotherapy was just absolutely lacking. Do you think that goes some way as well into having to make sure that people are better prepared for radiotherapy?
Perceptions and myths. And like you said, sort of raise the public's understanding and awareness of radiotherapy. I think it's so important.
I think it's something that's so Dr. Liz Reardon, when she came on, obviously she was an oncoplastic surgeon and she used to consent people with radiotherapy. She herself kind of said that her and lots of people have always been almost setting patients up to fail by saying it's just a bit of radiotherapy, you'll be fine, until she was very open and honest, and I think we all really appreciated it, that when she went through it, she realised how hard it is. That self-realisation of, well, it isn't actually that easy. And we've had Emma Hallam and Kath Holborn on talking about late effects, specifically in survivorship, where, again, even in a therapeutic radiography setting, we keep saying to patients, oh, you might get some late effects, they might happen, they might not. But actually, you don't know when they're going to happen. Some patients will get really bad late effects from 3 months after radiotherapy, and that will stay with them until they die. But some patients won't get anything at all. But we can't keep saying in the profession that, oh, you might get a bit of tiredness, you need to explain it. Okay, you might find that, you're not able to walk up and down stairs as properly, or if you're doing exercise, you'll get out of breath because you've had chemotherapy, and that's a normal side effect, is shortness of breath from chemo. But that understanding, it's not just for general public. I think we need to be better, especially as therapeutic radiographers. Joe and I bang on about this all the time. If you're talking to a patient going into the treatment room, you need to make every single conversation count. I mean, it's really, really important. I think we keep underplaying things that can happen. I mean, we talk about skincare, for example, my big thing, but we tell patients, just put some cream on, you'll be fine. And then when they get a reaction, oh, it's just normal. But then what happens if that lived experience of it, so that psychological damage of every day, they're not able to wear clothes? Or I've had a patient who couldn't go to her daughter's wedding, couldn't put the wedding dress on because just the chest area where we treated it was so sore, and she had to watch it on camera, but no one had warned her about that, which is, I would say, is quite simple. So I think little projects like this would be really, really good just with these findings. I know you had an illustration artist. You sent some photos to us. It'd be great. They were amazing.
So we were really lucky. As part of the project, we decided to involve Virginia Fernandez, who is a PhD student, but she is also a really talented artist and illustrator, and she joined every workshop and captured our discussions creatively in a way. I mean, I struggle to draw a stick man, so I cannot, I just think what she does is fantastic. And so did the young people and the researchers. I think it was brilliant for them to, first of all, kind of have a record that's not just sort of pages and pages of written text, because we could have transcribed it all, and that's fine. And, I find that a bit interesting, but actually seeing it visually and all on one page is, the drawings are fantastic. And she showed us, at the end of every workshop, because we usually only seen the top of her head as she was sort of drawing away, at the end of every workshop she would show us what she'd come up with, which was, as she said, a bit of a draft that she would go and finalise and colour in. And then so we have a piece of art from each workshop, and then just the other day she sent me through the final, a sort of digital version which covers everything that we talked about, and she's put us all as little cartoons, which the young people absolutely loved as well. And I think it was a great thing to do in itself for the project, but now we have that artwork. The young people were, chatting a lot about, well, how could we use artwork like that? Could we come up with like a little comic or a little zine, or just how can we use it to try and help other future patients? And so they really like that kind of idea of not just having a kind of standard leaflet, and looking at other ways that are a bit more creative and a bit more tailored to their age group. And they were really keen on having something digital as well. So they thought, well, we don't often or always read leaflets. Sometimes we lose them, and it would be great to have everything, available digitally and kind of easily accessible on phones and things like that. And they also had a great idea for an app, which was just way above and beyond the scope of the project, but a brilliant idea in itself. And it was great to hear of them, thinking about how we could use the artwork and other things that we could do to help patients in the future. So we've been so surprised and pleased with the opportunities that have come out of the project and just how well it's gone, because you never quite know, and like I said before, our main aim was that it was a positive, meaningful experience for the people that were involved, but so much more has come out of it, than we could have ever expected. We're sort of finalising a bit of a summary report, which I want to share with all of the charities and everyone that I spoke to, at the beginning, at the start of the project, because it would be great for them to kind of find out how it went and again sort of keep those conversations and relationships going. Yesterday I met with the teenage and young adult cancer team at Guy's, because they were really interested in hearing more about the project, so it's brilliant to feed back to them. One of the PhD students who took part, she's now going to organise, she was just blown away by the young people, and she thought the experience was so valuable and motivating for her work, and for her as a kind of PhD student at the beginning of her career, which again will hopefully be long lasting. I think it's great that she's had that experience early on, and she'll hopefully continue to engage with patients now. And she's going to organise a day in April, an engagement day for patients in London, and some lab tours and things like that. I am going to present the project at the
Lisa, how's the outcomes from the project actually going to be disseminated? So I'm just thinking for healthcare professionals listening, thinking I'd love to see this, I'd love to hear what the patient said and how I can improve my practice. Have you got plans on how maybe you're going to take forward some of their suggestions? And I know obviously the project itself, Radiation Reveals, come to the end, but what's the plans for going forward?
I guess one of the things that we want to do with this group is just find a way to get together in person and hopefully bring them to have a tour of the labs and meet the researchers in London. And that's something we're definitely planning to hopefully do in the next few months. And I think that it's, even though, like you said, the main part of the project has come to an end, I think that we've now got a really engaged group of young people and researchers, and hopefully there will continue to be opportunities for us to share what we've learned, and hopefully make a difference. Definitely.
I think some of the work you've done is obviously linking in with Radiotherapy UK as well. It's a charity that Joe and I do a lot of work with. So it's the main kind of charity, if you want, for the UK around just radiotherapy. They do a lot of work, but I think some of this info and disseminating it through that,
and I
almost
already
to the level of kind of with MPs.
Therapeutic radiographers and radiotherapy departments going, well, yeah, we could get involved.
Parliament to drop
I know
a letter
Naaman
off
and
about
I
catch up
have
with
had
cancer.
discussions
But these
about
are the sort of lived experiences that people need to listen to,
ultimately
especially up to that
projects,
level.
But also maybe work with those people
brilliant.
to think about how we can educate therapeutic radiographers. We have lots of academic friends who follow the podcast and support Naaman and I, and even using that to help train the future workforce, I think is really, really important. And I know with the podcast it's easy to think that we focus on radiotherapy and radiation treatments, but actually it's hopefully a vehicle that we can use to link out to other allied health professions, GPs, to again all just say the same message about radiotherapy. Even saying radiotherapy might be a cancer treatment option will allow someone to then go away and maybe do some further research, and we definitely need to improve our visibility. I know Dr. Amanda Balderston, who's been on the podcast before, did a tweet the other week about the images that are on Google. Really
with
simplistic.
Sort of the conversations they've had.
You
And
Google
have you picked up on anything
radiotherapy
around
and
the communications that
ancient,
sort of
old-style
healthcare professionals
linear
use around them? I know with one of the
accelerators are on
illustrations
show.
you sent, I remember
and you
messaging
just
you
think,
back
no
saying
wonder,
the
'cause
word
if I
battle
was
there.
anyone,
It's not,
the
it's
first
not a
thing they're
word that
going
I
to
like
do
to
is
use
Google
around cancer
radiotherapy,
in
look
any
at
way,
some
but
images,
I think you said
and see
lots of
these really
patients had used that
old
to
grey
describe
pieces
different
of
parts of
kit
their
and
journey
go,
as well.
oh my gosh, what are they going to do to me? So it's from start to finish, isn't it? It's the information that's out there in the public domain to hopefully help educate
the word battle was really used by the young people only in terms of their diagnosis, and often, so a few of them were diagnosed after presenting at A&E because that's how bad it got. You know, they'd went through various different routes, but actually, you know, the situation had just got so bad they went to A&E, and then that's what led them to be diagnosed. And that's just that I just think that's not on. I don't think people should be having to do that and go to those lengths and be in that level of pain. And so that was really where a lot of the battle descriptions were coming in. They absolutely, you know, agreed that they didn't really want the battle and fight language to be used in terms of their treatment and in terms of them living with a cancer diagnosis. It's just not something that they could relate to. But yeah, communication was really key. The other thing that they mentioned in relation to communication was just the importance of being treated as a person. And I'm sure, you know, the majority of people that they spoke to did a great job, and they mentioned, you know, some radiographers and nurses and different people just having a chat with them about everyday things while they were going through their treatment, and how just reassured that made them feel, how comfortable that made them feel. You know, someone said, oh, you know, I didn't just want to feel like a bit of meat on a, you know, lying on a table, because, you know, as you guys know, and as I've learned listening to the podcast, sometimes there can be a lot of people in the room and you're kind of lying there with maybe not very much on, and it's quite a vulnerable position. But actually just someone having a conversation with you about, I don't know, what you did at the weekend or what you're going to do, or something just really normal and everyday made all the difference. You know, communication is so key at every level in terms of how we talk about cancer, but also, you know, like you said, those interactions, and they do count. They absolutely do count. It might feel like nothing, you know, or very insignificant to one person to have that conversation, but for another person it's massive. Yeah, and that's one thing. Oh, sorry. No, I was just gonna say, yeah, absolutely agree with you. And we know that a lot of the things that we're sharing from the project, we know that there's brilliant
absolutely,
practice
and I
going
think
on,
we definitely see that.
as positive
that's
an
part of our
experience
bread and butter
possible.
of kind of communicating and effectively supporting patients is, remembering those little details. So if Mr. Bates went and saw his grandchildren on the weekend, bring it up the following Monday, or if you know that someone was going to go for a run on the weekend, asking them how they got on. I think that kind of communication and rapport that we have with our patients is a lot why people
really sticks
want to
with
get
you.
into radiotherapy.
So I think
but I do
the
also
pandemic, when we moved to London, I was having some issues
with catch-up
got through the system really quickly. The GP was really nice. Went for my endoscopy. The first person, I think it was a nurse practitioner who saw me, said, "Oh, you're too young to have a problem. I don't really know why you're here." So, oh, great, fine. I'm worried about this. I've had to take a day off work, take annual leave to come and have this procedure. Go in very, very groggy during the procedure because I got fentanyl to have it. Bit of a wuss. I've always thought I wouldn't be a wuss, but actually I was like, no, I want the sedation. I'm worried. This could be a real thing going through the 2-week cancer weight pathway thing. That's another kind of buzz term, isn't it, when you get told? Obviously that's a quicker way to get a scan, etc. But it's scary. Again, even going in the room, I think the registrar or whoever was doing it was just saying, "Oh, well, you're only 27. Nothing's going to really be wrong." I was like, "Okay, you don't know that yet. You're not really helping." And then right at the end, I think one of the nurse practitioners was practicing how to deliver the news. I didn't know anything that was going on. They forgot to let Katie, my fiance, in, who was just at the door pressing the buzzer, who was supposed to be there because I was so groggy. Not everything was fine, but still, I still remember that terminology, even just being completely clear, everything was fine. I remember the nurse just saying, "You were too young anyway, it was just a waste of resources, but this, everything was fine, don't worry about it." And I was just, every time I think about it now, and obviously talking to younger patients now, I'm in a department where we have a lot of younger patients, just that experience of, you're just too young, but what do you do? Like, you need to be listened to. We keep telling patients now, "Oh, don't worry about the pandemic, don't worry about this, go and get checked out." But if you're not getting that support right from the start, if I hadn't had that GP, I wouldn't have got that.
No, go on, sorry.
Other GPs I've spoken to recently about starting other medication or whatever, they've just been like, "Oh, you're too young to have this problem." But it happens all the time, doesn't it?
Like you say, when things are a worry and when you've actually got yourself to the point where you're asking for help or reassurance or to find out what this is, the last thing you should come up against is is someone saying, you're too young or don't worry, it's probably nothing. That's not reassuring. That's not, you want to know, you want someone to take you seriously, to listen. And, we know that cancer doesn't discriminate. We know that it affects, 1 in 2 people. Those stats are kind of, I think, quite widely known now. So we shouldn't be saying, you're too young, because I think it might put some people off sort of seeking help or kind of seeking that sort of clarification and further investigation. And again, you want people to do that as soon as possible, as soon as they have concerns, because you want to take that worry away and hopefully reassure them that it's nothing. But if it's not, if we can get things diagnosed early, then there's hopefully as many options on the table as possible. And yeah, it was hard to hear the young people say that they were told that, and still being told that, still going through treatment. That's not helpful. It's I think they more want the recognition that they are young, and like we've talked about, of all the other things in their life that might be going on or they might feel like they're missing out on. That's far more important to kind of validate than just sort of almost dismiss them and say, "Oh, you're too young for this." So I have been a big supporter of Mummy Star for 5 years now. So Mummy Star, an amazing charity who support women who are diagnosed with cancer during pregnancy or shortly after giving birth. And as I've already talked about, I came to find Mummy Star through my own personal experience. So I was diagnosed with thyroid cancer when my twins were 5 weeks old, and someone mentioned Mummy Star to me, and I worked for another cancer charity at the time, and they were fantastic. But again, as we've been talking about, it's just about finding those people that really understand your specific situation. And I remember kind of reaching out to Mummy Star and saying, I've just been diagnosed with thyroid cancer. I have 5-week-old twins, and the first message I got back from Pete, who I know that you're going to be chatting to, just said, first off, congratulations on the birth of your twins. And I've mentioned this a few times to him, and I've mentioned it kind of publicly because, again, it's that small interaction, quite a small thing, but rather than starting with, I'm so sorry about your cancer diagnosis, which did come later, he started with the thing that was most important to me, and that was that I'd had these 2 gorgeous babies, and I kind of wanted the focus to be on them, and I wished it wasn't on anything else at that time. And so, yeah, I've kind of supported Mummy Star since then and tried to raise a bit of awareness and raise a bit of money for them. And last year I joined the Mummy Star team as information and support worker. It was quite a different role for me, kind of, as I said, sort of moving slightly away from the engagement work and into a support role. But it's given me such a good insight into the different ways that we can offer support and the importance of listening and just being there at difficult times in people's lives. And my experience at Mummy Star and my contacts that I've made there have been really great for the Radiation Reveal project, but vice versa, because I can talk about both and hopefully raise awareness of both at the same time.
Lisa, can I ask you about Mummy Star? So we're really lucky that we've got Pete coming on soon to talk about it. But
your passion for it really shows.
Kind of hear your
it's brilliant. I'm sure it helps so many people, especially with this sort of work for this cohort of people. I think your passion really shows that you want to help. And I think in the research world, as we said earlier, sometimes people are too focused on the end point. They forget who's actually in front of you. But it sounds like you really champion that, and it's amazing. So we are coming towards the end of the podcast, Lisa. I'm sure, again, we could talk all day about this. I know we're quite lucky. I think you said you might have some top tips for us from some of the participants.
Yeah, that's right.
That'd be great if we could hear those.
If I could have had all 10 of them, like, as you know, when we've chatted before, if I could have had all 10 of them here with me, then I absolutely would have. The podcast would have been a lot longer because they're a lovely, lovely chatty bunch. But we did speak about, the tips, like you say, the tips that they would have for radiographers, for healthcare professionals. And as I said before, we know that we're not saying that these things aren't being done. We know that many of these things are being done, but we do think that it's worth kind of further highlighting them. So I'll run through them. So if possible, we've talked a lot about peer support. So if possible, ask about peer support, ask about, their kind of support networks and kind of who they have supporting them and what they could get involved in. Explain side effects. It's so important, and again, I know we've already covered it, but explain side effects so that as much as possible people know what to expect, and how they might practically be able to help, or things that they could do to make that a little bit easier. And kind of related to that is, you've mentioned the importance of skin and skin care, and try and be proactive in terms of asking a patient how their skin is, and not leaving them in a situation where they're feeling helpless and having to come and say, look, I'm struggling with this, please can you help me. They said think about extra things that people might need to help them with claustrophobia. So again, I know that's a big thing, but they just said that, again, that was worth further highlighting and just remembering that people might not like the experience of actually being in treatment and be quite claustrophobic. They wanted to say that if, again, possible, sometimes recognise that sometimes people might need a break, especially if they're, coming off the back of a round of chemo, or, one young person spoke about the fact that when she first went for a proton beam radiotherapy, she came straight from chemo, travelled up to Manchester, it was long days, there was a lot going on, and she felt that she was a bit more poorly just because she hadn't had any kind of break, even just for half a day, or, any chance to just sort of recover from everything else that was going on. So I guess it's just sort of recognising that bigger picture as well. If possible, arrange treatment at the same time each day, so that people can get into a bit of a routine. you know, a lot of the young people spoke about just having appointments kind of scattered about, and they felt like then their whole life revolved around treatment, rather than maybe if it could be arranged at a similar time every day, then that would be a bit more helpful. Explain what's going to happen and why, so that young people fully understand, and, you know, definitely, unless it's really, really necessary, don't sort of direct things to other family members like parents or caregivers, you know, like listen to the young people and chat to them. We've got one specifically for kind of radioactive iodine treatment, but the two young people that had that treatment that were part of the project, you know, spoke about the fact that it would have been good to see the room and, you know, sort of again know what to expect from that treatment, because it is a little bit different again, and that you have to be in isolation and kind of stay in a room for a period of time. And, you know, one person said that they just remember the lead door closing and knowing that everyone that they cared about was on the other side of it and they couldn't get to them. You know, and that's hard. And I think it's not to say that we can completely stop that, but just as much as we can to sort of help them prepare. And all of the young people agreed, as I'm sure that we all do, that everyone should have access to good information and treatment no matter where in the country that they live. Because one of the things that came through in this project, you know, the fact that they all lived in England but in different places, treated in different hospitals, and they'd all had quite different experiences, some very positive but others not so positive, and they would like to see that a bit better for everybody. And the final one, which I think will always stick with me from this project, is just remember that they're young people first and patients second, and they really wanted to highlight that. So yeah, I think that was 10. That was certainly what they wanted to share.
Oh, they're brilliant, and I'm sure lots of people listening will really be able to take those on board. Lisa, have you got any top tips from you?
My only, I would just like to see more projects like this and more opportunities for patients to get involved, and certainly for researchers, but also, you know, all healthcare professionals to engage with patients and listen to them, but to make sure that when we do that, it's got to be done in the right way. So patients have got to be properly supported, they've got to be reimbursed or paid for their time. You know, often we're asking for patients to share a lot, and that shouldn't be a one-way thing. You know, we encouraged all the researchers to talk about why they'd got involved in cancer research, and you know, and sort of share a little bit of themselves as well, so that it wasn't, you know, it didn't feel so one way. So yeah, I'm not sure if it's so much of a top tip, but I just absolutely champion patient engagement and involvement in research, and with the process as a whole. I think it's one of the ways that we will make things much better going forward, and continue to support patients properly.
No, and I think that will kind of transverse into all aspects of healthcare, really, won't it? Just for everyone. And again, just want to say thank you so much for coming on. You've been a huge champion for these people, and I think hopefully moving forward, if anyone out there is listening who wants to do this sort of research, get in touch with Lisa. She's clearly done it very well. It'd be great to model what you've done. But yeah, thank you for everyone for listening to Rad Chat. So your hosts today have been Naomi Joel Anderson and Joe McNamara. So again, huge thank you to Dr. Lisa Whittaker for coming on today. Head over to our YouTube page just to see a live recording of the podcast. If you're utilising this podcast for CPD purposes, please consider the reflective question we've posted along with looking at all the links to resources and literature that we've discussed. To receive your accredited CPD certificate, please complete the Google form linked to the podcast. So our next guest to feature will be Pete Walroth, who will be discussing the amazing charity Mummy Star and his role as CEO. So thank you, and